It was a beautiful, clear night, strewn with countless stars shining over the calm waters of the ocean. The full moon, just rising above the surface, painted a wide silver path along the shore of my private beach. A nice, steady breeze made the 86-degree temperature delightful. I stood on a dark balcony and looked at my veranda, full of 3 dozen of my close friends and their acquaintances. Taking a sip of my 20-year-old bourbon and inhaling the aroma of my unsmoked Cohiba cigar, I watched as yet another man succumb to fatal attraction. "Are we going out on a yacht tomorrow?" asked my most faithful bodyguard, who stood nearby and observed the same thing as me. I smiled, sensing her impatience. "It looks like the likelihood of this has increased significantly." We continued to watch as my wife lifted a glass of champagne from a tray carried by a passing servant. In the process, she did not notice how her companion took half a step closer to the stairs. Turning back, she involuntarily followed him in order to maintain their established conversation distance. He deftly turned to the incredible view, impressively waving his hand with a glass, and lightly touched my wife's bare arm with his other hand. No doubt he complimented her beauty, comparing it to the beauty of the landscape. Her glance down and an involuntary step forward, accompanied by a flirtatious glance in his direction instead of looking at the view, confirmed my suspicions. The cavalier gestured again towards the beach and the shade it offered, and, holding her hand, he led her as if at a ball, and she allowed herself to be led. Alessandra walked towards me, bringing my glass to her lips before releasing it with a purring excitement and slowly running her hand along my groin. "When do you want me to stop them?" I lifted her chin and kissed her lightly. Her soft moan and squeeze of my now fully erect flesh showed that she was hoping that I would let things go too far. "As usual," I replied, grinning at her disappointment. "Although," I teased as she started to walk away, "maybe I'll let them finish on the yacht before the fishing starts." Her gaze was so hot that it almost lit my cigar. I turned my gaze again to see where my wife was being taken. Smiling inwardly at the usual choice, I took out a match, lit it, and waited for the sulfur to burn before bringing it to the cigar. The first sweet smoke of tobacco and leather caressed my palate and filled my lungs as I moved inside. The seducer of my wife chose the darkest path, as everyone else did before him. I refilled my drink and walked down the hallway to the room my wife and I shared. As I walked by, I paused for a moment to admire a boudoir-style painting of the love of my life. Her nudity was strategically placed to maintain minimal modesty. I took a sip of my drink and inhaled another thick puff as I studied her delicious form. I never tire of admiring her. I found several who could stand in her shadow, but none who could stand next to her. She is the embodiment of Aphrodite. So I understand why so many people want it. After they are drawn to her like moths to a flame, it is enough to hear her innocent laughter or see her naive glances to understand that their souls have already been sold. Continuing my way, I went to the wall of the balcony and looked down. Down there stood the lost and the hopeful. The couple spoke quietly. Neither realized that the acoustics of their position allowed me to hear most of what they were saying over the soft sound of the waves. I also noticed that they left their glasses somewhere. "Thank you. But you shouldn't say that. I love my husband. Perhaps this is so, but he must understand how special you are. Leaving you unattended even for a second is too much. You deserve to be adored." He came closer, and she placed her hand on his chest. Their dance progressed as always. "Please, I need to feel the taste of your lips," came an almost desperate request as his hand gently slid over her shoulder to the back of her head and the other rested on her thigh. I saw her shake her head in refusal, but I knew she couldn't resist for long. The goddess of love and passion cannot reject attraction. It would be against nature. He leaned down to take what wasn't offered, and she turned her head away, but her hand on his chest relieved the pressure a little. "Why did you follow me here then, if not to enjoy each other?" "I enjoyed our conversation. It doesn't have to be anything more." He pressed her closer, forcing her to lean against the smooth stone wall, cutting off any possibility of retreat. I heard her gasp in fear as their thighs touched and their eyes met. "No, please." I don't want to be unfaithful. He glanced down, then leaned closer again, closing the distance between their chests and bringing their lips almost close. If this is true, then why are you excited? Please, you don't have to. He leaned down and began kissing her neck, behind her ear, while his hand on her hip slid lower, touching the smooth skin where the slit of her dress gave access. She gasped again, feeling him press his tense body harder against hers. Both of her hands moved to his hips, trying in vain to push him away. This allowed his chest to press harder against hers. After a few moments spent kissing her neck, he pulled away to look into her eyes. Tell me the truth. You always notice how men look at you, don't you? They definitely lust after you, so much so that they undress you with their eyes. You notice this, right? I smiled as I saw my wife's lips part and her chest rise as her breathing began to quicken. It was impossible not to notice the approaching inevitability. Yes, he asked again. She looked down but nodded. Say it, the man demanded, holding her. Yes, I noticed them. You like this attention, don't you? Nod down again. Say it, Rory. Her eyes looked up when she heard her name. Yes, I like this attention, but I still don't want to be unfaithful. Then tell me, has anyone besides your husband kissed you? She closed her eyes, her brow furrowed. After a moment, she opened her eyes again and met his gaze. Yes. Did you kiss him back? Still looking worried, she continued to confess. Yes. How many times? A few, she said as I inhaled the sweet smoke of my cigar. Don't lie. Don't you get stalked at every opportunity when your husband isn't around? Yes, she answered a little stronger. You can't help but understand that your husband knows that you are constantly being watched. But at the same time they let you go. You deserve better. Someone who will put you at the center of his life. I snorted. Rory is on my everyday thought. Everything I do for her. Others may benefit from it, but no one else matters. I can give you pleasure. The pleasure your body craves. He will kill you if you continue. He'll never know, it said before their lips met and my wife's eyes closed. I watched as her arms slowly wrapped around his back and his hand on her hip moved higher, sliding under her dress. As their kiss deepened, I took another sip. The hand behind her head slid down her body and began to squeeze her breasts, and the other hand, hidden under the slit of her dress, completely cupped her buttock. I began to wonder where Alessandra was hiding. Another 30 seconds, and this man will try to take her right against the wall. I was about to throw the glass on his head when Rory lifted her leg onto his thigh and moaned loudly, breaking the kiss and throwing her head back. His hand was completely under her leg, and without a doubt, he already had access to the secret. It would have been enough for my wife to open her eyes and see me above them, but they remained closed while her boyfriend continued to caress her. Alessandra should have known the consequences of letting things go beyond the kiss, but she was still nowhere to be seen. A moment later, the man slid the strap of her dress off her shoulder, giving himself enough freedom to slip his hand into the bodice. I was already drawing in air to stop this action when I heard someone call Rory's name. Only after the second call did the couple notice this and quickly separate. Alessandra appeared around the corner just a moment before Rory had time to straighten her dress. I gulped down my drink and forced myself to look away so as not to attack my bodyguard and ruin the upcoming cruise. I quickly went downstairs and crossed the patio. A minute later, I had my back to the stairs as Rory emerged from the beach with Alessandra and her new friend. I made myself heard when I invited one of the CEOs of my many companies to join me on a yacht, knowing that he had to leave in 2 hours. When he refused, I expressed disappointment and suggested maybe next time before turning away. I smiled and kissed my darling, noticing her swollen lips, and then turned my attention to the man next to her. I noticed his smug grin as I asked him to join us on the cruise, explaining that we had a seat open up since my first choice was unavailable. His look was familiar to me. Every man who considers himself a bull wears one. Rory tried to make an excuse for him, but I wasn't going to let that happen. Do you have shoes for the deck and swimming trunks? If not, I'm sure we can find something for you. You won't need anything else. Rory picked up another glass of champagne and downed it in one gulp before placing it back on the passing tray. I pretended not to notice. I also pretended not to notice how our guest quickly glanced at my wife when her gaze was distracted. I can bring things from home. What time should I be here? What do you say, Rory, 9:30 or 10? She pressed herself close to me, avoiding looking at anyone. Both options will do, she finally answered. I smiled and shook hands with our guest. Great. Leave Alessandra your address, and we will send a car to pick you up. I turned around as if the conversation was over, but was convinced that tomorrow's entertainment was tempting. Honey, why don't you wear the new swimsuit I bought you? I'm sure it will look great, but make sure everything is shaved. Even your stripes will be visible in this suit. I led my wife past several groups of guests, explaining that we were heading to the bedroom, but they could stay and continue enjoying the evening. I fell behind a little, following her to admire her choice of outfit. The emerald silk dress hugged her like paint until the side slits, starting just above her buttocks, began to reveal her legs. I was a little disappointed that the cuts didn't start an inch lower. Then the paint would include her entire sculpted figure. However, I allowed my anger towards Alessandra to grow. The image of other people's hands touching what was mine made my heart beat faster. By the time we got to the room, I needed to take my anger out on someone. Not wanting to hurt my wife, I told her to stay dressed. Instead, I asked her to get me a drink and then undress me. I took my time waiting for Alessandra to arrive and tried to understand Rory's emotions as I began to ask her questions. Did you enjoy the evening? She handed me my drink, smiled, and began to untie my tie. Yes, I always enjoy evenings when we have guests. What exactly do you like? I like to communicate and talk with different people. Some of them are our friends, and others are your employees. What about those who come as friends of our guests? She froze for a moment, clearly surprised by the question. Some of them are cute, I think. How do you like the man you met this evening? The one who will go with us on the yacht tomorrow. What's his name? Daniel, I think. It was nice to talk to him. This is good. I wouldn't want to spend the whole day with someone boring. She laughed and looked at me. You find something interesting in everyone, even those you can't stand. You seem to get some kind of perverse pleasure when people open up completely to you. I think that's why you're so good at business. Everything I do for you. Every moment of work, every moment of my existence. I love you, Rory. Even when I'm angry, I still love you. She stopped while unbuttoning my shirt and didn't look me in the eyes. Are you mad at me now? I grabbed her chin, forcing her to look up, but at the same time pulled her hand to her groin. Yes, I'm angry. I want to know that you are still mine, but you have gone into the dark with another man. How do you think this makes me feel? Of course I'm angry. She should have realized that the situation was different. She had already left before, but I always returned her with ardent passion. Did she realize why? Can you feel how excited I am? She couldn't look down while I was holding her chin, so she closed her eyes. Yes, she whispered. I want to claim my rights to what belongs to me. You are mine, or not. She wrapped her arms around me and opened her eyes. Certainly. I never want anyone but you. Then why are you leaving? Her eyes closed again. I feel how much you love me, so much so that I can't help but think about you all the time. She opened her eyes again and met my gaze, full of devotion. I feel your gaze on me, and I love the way you look at me. I feel your hands touching me, caressing me, exciting me. With every breath, I feel you, and this feeling is wonderful. I feel you inside me when you make love to me, and I walk with this feeling all day. Every waking moment, you are in my thoughts, in my heart. I can't get enough of your touch, your smell, and the way you please me. When I see how other men look at me, I can't help but love that look, because it reminds me of your greedy glances. When they talk to me, I can't help but think about you because their voices remind me of how your voice gives me goosebumps. I know what they want from me, and I promise I've never wanted anyone but you. But I get lost in the sensations of you that permeate my soul. I promise that I don't see them, but always only you. That means I'll have to watch you more closely, Alessandra said from behind me, entering the room. Without taking my eyes off my wife, I offered a favor. Why don't you go to the kitchen and ask the chef to make us some snacks? I need to speak briefly with the head of security. Alessandra held the door open for Rory, drawing my gaze until the closing door blocked my view. Did you hear everything? I heard, Alessandra answered, taking off her weapon. Some were obvious, others were hidden. She really is a living goddess, I began. A goddess who radiates sexuality from every pore. No man can resist her charms. Those with even a drop of testosterone can't help but want to sleep with her. And those who are confident in themselves will always try. You know she's addicted. I pointed to the floor in front of me as I continued talking. As she stepped closer, I grabbed the front of her shirt and tore it open, scattering the buttons. Take off your clothes now. She began to quickly undress, but there was insolence in her eyes, and her smile resembled a grin. I told you to stop them before you did. You knew that her addiction would force her to give in to any progress that was offered to her, and yet you allowed it. Why? She took off her boots and began to pull down her pants before answering. Isn't it obvious? I want you to say it. She grinned, dropping her pants and lowering her panties. Are you saying what Daniel wanted from Rory? My anger flared again, but my excitement only intensified. Don't provoke me, Alessandra. Do you want to know if I kissed someone other than you? I glared at her, but continued to pull my pants down, kicking off my shoes. You know that no, unlike your wife, she mocked. Stop it, I demanded. She continued to grin as she took off the rest of her clothes. Stop changing the subject. Answer my question. I growled through clenched teeth. What else? She almost spat. This was the limit of my patience. I grabbed her by the hair and dragged her to the bed, where I sharply tilted her over the headboard. She could resist if she wanted to. After all, it was she who trained me in combat, and I knew for sure that if she started fighting, I would lose and lose quickly. But she didn't make a single move to stop me. When my hand came down forcefully on her bare buttock, she moaned. Oh, Lorne, yes, exactly for this. Each blow was accompanied by louder cries of excitement. Yes, oh God, yes, like this. Take what's yours. Oh God, yes. When I realized that I was already beating my arm until it was bruised, I became even angrier. I roughly pulled her hair, arching her back, and with one hand I squeezed her breasts as hard as I could. My disappointment with Rory and anger at Alessandra outweighed all rational arguments. A few minutes later, both were sweaty and exhausted. We were both so sweaty and exhausted that when I let go of her hair, I rolled her onto the floor, where I lay there, breathing heavily. Alessandra also did not move at first, but soon her trembling legs gave in, and she collapsed next to me on the floor. The best sex of my life, she said between shaky breaths. Well, Rory said from the doorway, I don't know whether to be glad that he was angry at you or jealous that it wasn't me. I hope you both understand that all the windows and doors are open. There are at least 30 guests and staff here who heard you having sex. She placed a tray of snacks and a bottle of Merlot on the dresser next to Alessandra's gun. Then, as if nothing unusual had happened, she walked to her dressing table, sat down, and began to take off her shoes. You let Rory get to the point of being groped just so I could have sex with you. We do this all the time anyway. Why was today different? Her gaze became defiant again as she rose to her feet. We have sex whenever you want, and I wanted you to take me then and the way I want. Her attempt at manipulation angered me even more, but I wasn't about to reward her for it again. You'll fool me once, as they say. I gathered her clothes and threw them through the door leading to her room. Take your weapon and leave. I turned to my wife and saw her looking at me. There was a mixture of sexual desire and anxiety in her expression. Did you lie? My anger immediately evaporated like a torn bandage, leaving behind an open and exposed wound. I approached her and whispered, Never. You said you didn't want men to touch me, but you're just as lost in it as I am. Isn't that right? Rory, I've never lied. I don't want them to touch you, but I also know that they can't help but be attracted to you. Some people think they can take what doesn't belong to them, and with such people I use stricter methods of persuasion so that they leave you alone. I ask Alessandra to monitor you to determine what containment measures are necessary. Sometimes a stern look is enough, sometimes a conversation is enough, and sometimes something more. She stood up and turned her back to me, lifting her golden locks in a silent request. I put my hands on her shoulders, admiring her soft neck. I examined the spot behind her ear where the other man had kissed her skin. This man knew her taste, her texture, the sound she whispered into his ears as his hands explored her body. I gently ran my fingers where his hands slid over the thin straps of the dress. I kissed the place where he left his mark, and in my thoughts I continued to repeat, "Mine." I gently ran the back of my fingers over her shoulder blades, and goosebumps appeared on her arms. Then my hands slowly moved towards the zipper on her back, and I continued to place gentle kisses on her neck and shoulder until the zipper smoothly moved down 12 inches. Turning her to face me, I allowed her to look into my eyes, knowing that she would see only adoration. Her questioning gaze gradually changed, mirroring my own expression. She adored me as much as I adored her. Our lips came together on their own. Our eyes slowly closed because we could not look at the purity of our divinely inspired love. We moaned into each other's lips as our passion flared, as it always did. A few hours later, we plunged into sweet, satisfied bliss. We woke up in each other's arms to the sound of the bedroom door opening. I brushed Rory's hair out of his face and looked around, noticing clothes scattered in different places. Our maid Luna followed Alessandra into the room and began gathering her clothes. This was common in the mornings after we had guests. We were usually more careful about what we left behind. Alessandra's morning report sounded surprisingly cheerful. I wasn't sure if this was because she was just excited about achieving her goals last night, her participation in the epic simulated sex, or looking forward to tonight's fun. However, it didn't matter. Knowing Alessandra, I was sure it was the latter. Breakfast will be ready in 30 minutes, unless you need a longer shower. The crew has already assembled for our cruise and will be ready to depart no later than 8:30. The car has already left for Daniel, since he lives more than an hour away. Yesterday's reports are on your desk and ready for review. The indicators are reported to be favorable. Your personal assistant has been notified of today's sailing and will handle your calls. Thank you, I replied. I'm looking forward to getting out on the water. You know how much I love to take care of the needs of our guests. My eyes slid to Luna, and my mood brightened even more when I saw the maid rushing to the bathroom to fetch Rory, knowing what awaited me when I joined them. I looked back at my security supervisor. Don't go too far today. I was making fun of you yesterday when I said I'd let them finish. You know I don't want this. Her cheerful expression became more languid. I know. And now you know what happens when you tease me too much. I think Rory will be in a vulnerable state today. She knows that we know what happens during her outings and how much it ignites my masochistic side. She came closer, entering my personal space. You mean your voyeur side? No, I shook my head, becoming serious. I mean my masochistic side. I've bought so much that I'm afraid of losing just one thing. I know that you and my entire empire will remain even after my death. I know that you love me. You know I love you, but you will never be Rory's equal. You won't be able to comfort me if something happens to her. You know that every member of your staff is ready to give their life to save her. She is as safe as possible. You can lose a person not only physically. If she dies, I will grieve, but the utter grief of losing her love will destroy me. So yes, I'm talking about masochism. In that case, she teased, I'll need to always have my morning after pills on hand in case he impregnates her. Her mockery startled me, and I was sure the expression on my face conveyed shock. She just grinned and walked away, leaving me standing there in disbelief. Several long moments passed before I could force my feet to head towards the bathroom. Walking into the shower, I saw Luna lathering conditioner into Rory's hair. I stood under one of the 6 shower heads to wet myself while she finished with my wife. Taking some shampoo, I began to wash myself when I felt a washcloth and a pair of breasts press against my back. After rinsing my hair, I received a quick kiss from Rory, who then came out to dry herself off as I felt Luna pleasure me. Realizing the lack of time, I pulled Luna to her feet and explained to her our today's schedule, to which she, of course, was slightly upset. But she quickly recovered and continued helping me with the shower. And yes, I was polite enough to return the favor. 3 hours later, when we were an hour and a half from shore, Daniel finally realized that Alessandra was not going to let him be alone with Rory. He found me on the very top deck, ahead of the captain's bridge. I smiled when I saw his outfit. He took my words literally. He was wearing swimming boots, an open white linen shirt, and tight swimming trunks. The ox always thinks that demonstration is the key to successful seduction. I shook his hand and invited him up the stairs. On the deck below, I led him into the forward saloon and motioned for him to sit down while I headed to the bar. "What will you drink?" He almost answered automatically, but grinned and changed his choice to an ambiguous one. "Same as you." I chuckled and poured him a tall glass with an ice cube and my favorite bourbon, then topped off my glass and joined him. I handed him the glass. "Well, what can you say about my little toy?" He looked around before answering. "I think I haven't had time to see everything yet. I almost got lost in the lower decks while looking for my cabin. Without a doubt, this is the largest ship I have ever been on. Technically, it's a ship. The length of her hull is 225 feet. He raised his glass apologetically. "Sorry, ship. Although I have been on several cruise ships, this is definitely the largest private ship I have been on." Seeing his surprise after the first sip of my favorite drink lowered my opinion of him a little. "Very nice, thank you. You have a beautiful house, an amazing yacht, and excellent taste in alcohol. Glad you liked it. It's not surprising, though. That's a $400 portion." His eyebrow raised and his smile widened before he took another sip. While he was drinking, I took 2 Cohiba cigars from the humidor and offered him one. He declined, but knew better than to give a millennial-style lecture on health. I lit a cigar and took a deep breath with pleasure. "Are you sure? I wouldn't want you to miss out on any of the wonderful experiences this cruise has to offer." I almost smiled as he allowed his contempt for me to quickly flash across his face before it returned to the expression he had shown the night before. Here he is, the bull has shown himself. This was confirmation that this man thought he could take what did not belong to him. He would have avoided our competition if he had been able to be content without going overboard. It's time to set the hook. "Lorne, your name is Lorne, isn't it?" I nodded and took another sip. "Lorne, I need to know something." Nodding, I replied, "Wise people strive for knowledge, Daniel. Ask anything." He paused to consider his words as I set my glass down and leaned back in my easy chair. "Why did you invite me?" "You were in the right place at the right time. Also, my beautiful wife seemed to enjoy your company. I've seen you talk a few times. Am I wrong?" His smile brightened slightly and his eyes showed interest in the possibilities ahead. "Oh no, you're not wrong. Rory is an incredible woman. It's very nice to talk to her." I chuckled. "Nice to talk? And that's all? Personally, I can't take my eyes off her." He nodded. "Yeah, I'd say she's nice to look at too." I inhaled the smoke from the cigar again and blew it out into the sky, continuing to study it for a moment. I decided that there was nothing further to discuss. He imagined himself as a bull and tried to take what did not belong to him. Nothing else mattered. "Daniel, be honest. I know what most men think when they just see her. You spoke to her. You must have stronger thoughts than most. What do you really think about her?" He was silent only for a moment, believing that I was a typical cuckold. "No offense, but I think she's the hottest woman I've ever seen, even heard of, let alone met." "Why should I be offended by this? I completely agree with you. She is my everything. I'm ready to do anything to make her happy. I bought this yacht and named it after her only because she once told me that she had never been on a boat. I thought the ship was called Aphrodite. This is true. Rory was a nickname used by fans of Aphrodite. I think my wife was named correctly too, isn't it? He smiled. I didn't know that. Now that I know, I agree, the name Rory suits her even more. You enjoyed spending time with her last night, didn't you? Yes. Were you hoping to spend more time with her today? Certainly. Were you hoping she would wear that bikini I mentioned? He grinned. Honestly, yes. See, being honest isn't that hard. I think I can convince her to wear it for a little afternoon tan. And when our eating settles, we'll be ready for some competitive fishing. Other than having sex with my wife, I can't say I enjoy anything more than catching big fish. It's almost a satisfying rush, like the danger of running with the bulls. Have you ever had to do something so dangerous that you could have died, but you just had to do it? I did off-road racing and skydiving. It was an adrenaline rush. Yes, but I'm talking about stalking a big game, fighting it for hours, when the anticipation and danger can tear your heart apart. The adrenaline rush of looking your prey in the eye and knowing it wants to kill you back. The fish are not exactly big game. It may be tedious, but it is not dangerous. You'd be surprised how dangerous it is to fish the way I do. But let's not worry about that until lunch. For now, enjoy your drink, stroll the decks, enjoy the sun. He nodded and thanked me again before leaving to explore the ship. I made sure Alessandra would watch him while I went in search of my wife. She was in our cabin, masturbating, lifting her light dress up to her chest. I just leaned against the door frame without closing the door. The risk of being seen made us both smile, but only for a moment. Her face contorted in pain, and her moans became louder. I knew she wouldn't last long, and I was right, it was all over soon. We smiled at each other as she came to her senses. When her breathing became easier, I asked, "Was it because of me?" "Always," she exhaled. "So it doesn't have to do with you knowing what's going to happen." She bit her lip and looked worried. "Are you trying to make me angry again?" "No, never. I want you to be as happy as you make me. Even more. Always tell me the truth, Rory. Always, no matter what." She got out of bed and walked towards me, her dress returning to its natural position under the influence of gravity. We both knew full well that the corridor behind our cabin stretched almost the entire length of the ship, and someone could see it. "You're going to test us again." I didn't lie about what happened to my mind and body in those moments. Once everything gets to a certain point, I'm left only with you. I can't stop wanting to feel you. Feel your love for me in every sense. This is getting so strong, Lorne. If you don't stop me, I'll let anyone have sex with me, thinking it's you. This does not answer my question. Have you been satisfying yourself by thinking about our upcoming test? After a moment, biting her lip, she looked down and nodded. I took us far enough into the cabin to close the door. You know I can't handle it either. Danger is too much adrenaline. But the danger has changed now, hasn't it? She nodded again, and I encouraged her to speak out loud. Yes. How, Rory? How have things changed? You know that we both passed all the tests. Why is this different? Because of last night. Alessandra told you what happened, and you were so angry. I was afraid that it was my fault. But you said it was her fault, and now I know that she is part of our trials, and... And what? I trust you no matter what. But she liked to bring you to this state when you took her. This made me think that next time she won't stop. I was imagining someone preparing me for you when you appeared at the door. I felt you everywhere at once, and you saw what happened. I can't handle it. If she doesn't stop, I won't understand that it's not you. You know that I love you more than life itself, right? Yes, honey. I am your Rory, your everything, your Aphrodite. You are my Lorne, my everything, my Eros. Your love is my life just as mine is yours. Then, no matter what happens, we can't lose, right? She hugged me tighter, but her face showed concern. Even if he has sex with me. You said you would see and feel me, not him. If it's true, you won't cheat. Either way, it will be my fault. As long as I know that you love me, I can get through this. The only thing that will destroy me is if you stop loving me. She hugged me tightly again, saying, I think it's time for me to get ready. Do you really want me to shave everything? I felt a familiar pain as dangerous images flooded my mind, but I couldn't help but whisper, yes. She headed to the bathroom, agreeing to meet for lunch in the dining room. I left our cabin, imagining myself in a narrow alley with an angry bull rushing straight at me. Lunch passed, and Alessandra carried on most of the conversation, diffusing awkward pauses. Both Rory and I were filled with anxiety. Her excitement fueled mine as Daniel shamelessly devoured Rory's every nervous breath. I couldn't help but notice that Alessandra was smirking along with Daniel, playing football with me under the table and making sexual innuendos in conversation. Daniel held back his comments, hoping that my hints about upcoming events were worth a few more minutes of patience. All too soon, we found ourselves on the foredeck, with our sun loungers lowered. No one could see us, and the team knew not to disturb us unless we called, especially on cruises where there was only one passenger and the flight was immediately after our events. The deck was equipped with 2 double lounge chairs with side tables and an ice bucket. The tables also included a bottle of bourbon for Daniel and me, a mini humidor for me, a pitcher of strawberry margarita for Rory, and, comically, a pitcher of some kind of pink cocktail with candy for Alessandra. In addition to the drinks, there were several large bottles of tanning oil, enough for at least 10 guests. Unsurprisingly, the couples turned out like this. Daniel and I sat closer to the aisle to share bourbon, my bodyguard next to me, and Rory with her guest. With Rory admitting her fears today, I wasn't going to let us get drunk before the test. However, I think it wouldn't take much time. As soon as Rory took off her cape, Daniel devoured her with his eyes like a mad dog. He didn't even glance at Alessandra, even though their swimsuits were the same. Alessandra's spandex bikinis were red, while Rory's were white and had no strings. The stretchy ropes made these outfits easy to put on and take off, even though there wasn't much to take off. The top consisted of strings and 2 tiny triangles no larger than $50, and the bottom was a simple rectangle measuring 10 by 4 centimeters, attached with the same strings. It was impossible to hide any vegetation there. It was also impossible to hide my excitement. Daniel immediately began showering Rory with compliments as soon as she took off her cape. She still stood, poured herself a drink, and drank it. She had to watch as Alessandra began applying oil to my shoulders, neck, and ears. I flinched but didn't say anything when she spoke. Daniel, these swimsuits are tiny. We're all going to need lots and lots of oil. Hey, Rory, I'll take care of your husband. Why don't you oil Daniel up, and then he'll take care of you? My heart was pounding as I leaned my head back against Alessandra's firm breasts, and she carefully coated my face and neck with oil. Rory closed her eyes for a moment, then set the glass down and began to move towards a smug Daniel on her knees. It was like I was in a trance as Alessandra turned me this way, and that to make sure I was fully covered. At the same time, Rory's anxiety made her work much faster. She simply poured oil on his back and quickly smeared it. She finished his back, arms, and legs, then tried to pass the oil to him to lubricate the front. Alessandra leaned towards me and whispered, "Not now," as she pushed me onto my back. I gave her a warning look, but she continued as she began to lubricate the front of my legs. "Rory, he's your guest, right?" Daniel rolled over onto his back and placed his hand on her thigh as she looked at me and then looked up at Alessandra. "Well, is that so?" she asked again. The answer, yes, was reluctant, but she made no further attempts to pass the oil. I knew Alessandra was speeding up the rhythm of Rory's playing, but then her hand slid up my leg and under my swim trunks. "Be a good housewife, Rory. Finish with him, and he will probably return the favor." "Really, Daniel?" He kept his eyes on Rory and nodded before answering. "It will be my greatest pleasure to take care of you, Rory. Come on, oil my body. Do it well, and soon my hands will be on you. Make sure to cover me everywhere." Alexandra turned my face away from the other bed, and I heard, "That's it, cover everything." She met my gaze as she stood up, and she began to have sex with me. Once I realized how vulnerable both women were, she started teasing again. I heard the fishing is going to be particularly tough today, Lorne. The crew said they've spotted a blue marlin. This could be your toughest fight yet. And something tells me Rory might be teaching our guest some of the finer points of perfect synchronization. If he casts the line at the right moment, the bait will fall exactly where he wants it. I know you won't want to pay the price for him taking your trophy. I've never made a mistake with a cast. What makes you so confident he'll win today? Her grin widened and her eyes laughed for a few seconds before she lay down on me and whispered, Lorne, there are 3 differences in the running of the bulls today. First, the obstacles that stood in his way will disappear when the time comes. The only thing that is unclear to me is whether he will convince her to remove them or tear them down himself. Second, your aggression last night was my work, and now you feel that fear that I may not intervene. But you still trust me. You know that my loyalty to you is complete, and you believe that I will protect you in everything. For this, you will allow this bull to go to his goal until the very last moment. I'm so fast, don't you think I'll be late? I hope your heart can't stand it, because if not, he'll definitely take it. Can you feel it? Can you feel your heart beating under my chest? Your arousal excites me too. She kissed me and moved on me again before continuing. But Lorne, the third reason your winning streak will end is definitely a foregone conclusion. I've been watching her all day. I've seen you discuss this ordeal. You've freed her from guilt. She knows you'll love her no matter what. What? Even if he has sex with her? She immediately covered my mouth with hers to prevent me from objecting. My attempt at protest was probably more of a groan, especially mixed with Alexandra's voice. The other bed was silent for a few moments, but I forced my head of security to break our kiss when I heard, "My turn. No, on your stomach. I want you to look at me while I finish." Alexandra and I watched as Rory lay down, then brushed her hair away from her neck. She was turned towards me and our eyes met, but then closed as Daniel began to pour a large amount of warm oil onto her back and did not stop. Rivers of oil flowed down my right buttock, down my leg, and back up my left. Daniel grinned at us as he moved to her feet and began rubbing the oil in. He didn't just cover her skin, he gave her a real massage. I looked at Rory's face, seeing her brows furrow and her mouth parted with pleasure. Oh, that's good. I began to spread oil on Alexandra without massaging. I wanted to finish quickly and be ready to intervene when needed. Then I noticed how thin the rope was that covered her buttocks. She covered practically nothing. I applied more oil and began to rub it in, but her tightly pumped buttocks required deep attention. I looked up and saw her looking at Daniel as he reached the top of Rory's legs. When she spoke, he looked at her and saw her smile and nod. His grin turned into a smirk, and he returned to Rory's buttocks, beginning to give them a deep massage. I continued to hurry, keeping my eyes on the other bed, especially when Rory let out moans and cries of encouragement. This was also the moment when Daniel started answering her with questions. Do you like it? Hmm. No, Rory. You know my rules, he said. Yes, came her soft answer. When our eyes met, she slowly closed them again and relaxed her face with a slight smile. I didn't hear you. Do you like my touch? Yes. What? Yes, sir. He gave her a quick slap on the buttocks. Don't call me sir. I'm sure you call Lorne sir when he makes you tell him everything, don't you? Sometimes. Not always. Alexandra quickly rolled over onto her back and pulled me towards her ear. Don't be mad, Lorne. He's already kissed her, groped her breasts, and turned her on. You're the matador, remember? And he's the bull. She felt my tension ease as this analogy brought clarity to me. She lay back on the bed, and we both looked at the dead man and his target. He looked in our direction and smiled, as if he knew that soon she would be begging him to make love to her. What's my name, Rory? Her eyes opened, and she looked at me. Lorne. He slapped her butt again, making her flinch slightly. What's my name, Rory? Her face contorted in confusion as she sat up to look behind her. Daniel, you shouldn't do this. I glanced at Rory and noticed that she was watching me while Daniel finished lubricating her hands. Do you like looking at them, Rory? Without turning to him, she answered, Yes, Daniel. I continued to caress Alexandra while Daniel poured the oil onto Rory's chest, but put the bottle aside. Don't look at them. Look only at me. Lorne knows your body. He knows your desires. He invited me here to touch you, didn't he? Yes. What? Yes, Daniel. He shook his head and stopped touching her. Complete answers, Rory. Yes, Daniel. He invited you to touch me, and more. Smiling, he probably mistakenly thought it was a good thing. He poured the oil onto her stomach and began rubbing it over her ribs. Do you hear what your husband is doing to your friend? Yes, Daniel. I hear that she has a good time with him. Are they having sex? Yes, Daniel. They had sex again last night when I found out they knew you touched me. He smiled and leaned closer. You mean when we kissed in the dark? Yes, she closed her eyes, furrowing her brows. You said you didn't want to be unfaithful, but you still followed me into the dark and kissed me. And when I touched your ass, what did you do, Rory? What did you do with your foot? I picked her up. Why? I needed to feel him, feel Lorne. But Lorne wasn't there, Rory. Yes, yes, in my heart, he is always with me. I felt him touching me and wanted more. He told her to open her eyes, but at first she refused. Then, after a second demand, she obeyed. Take it off. You know why I was invited. You admitted that you like my touch. Lorne wants me to touch you. Take it off so I can touch you the way you want. I love my husband, Daniel. He smiled meaningfully. He's watching. You know what he wants. Take it off. Rory looked scared again and slowly removed her tangled top before lifting her hips and pulling her underwear down. She trembled slightly as she lay back down and closed her eyes. Do you hear how much pleasure he gave her? Yes, Daniel, she whispered between heavy breaths. Would you like me to please you the same way? My wife's face scrunched up again, and she bit her lip but didn't answer. Tell me, Rory. Yes. I sat down and put my feet on the deck as if I wanted to take a closer look. Daniel just grinned and continued to caress Rory. However, he rose to his knees and found himself between her legs. I shook my head, indicating not to do this, but when I did not intervene, he took this as permission. My expression changed to a smile. I'm sure he thought I liked what I saw. Do you want me to have sex with you, Rory? Daniel asked with inordinate confidence, starting to lean closer. Yes, take me. While preparing for sex, he didn't see my fist until it hit his throat. He fell back, gasping, and I took his place between Rory's legs. I didn't stop to think about what would happen to our guest and focused on making love to my wife. I vaguely remember the sounds of a short struggle, some screaming and a few curse words, but my focus was on Rory. We made love for several hours before I took her to our cabin. We showered together, and I told her to rest while I got dressed. A few minutes later, I stood at the stern of the yacht, accepting a glass of 20-year-old whiskey and a cigar with the tip already cut off from the hands of an assistant. Taking a sip before the assistant lit the cigar, I nearly groaned at the first sweet, creamy taste. Instead, I walked closer to the man who thought he was the bull. People like him always think that they can take whatever they want without thinking about the consequences, never thinking about how it affects the lives of others. I regarded what was about to happen as a service to the institution of marriage and love in general. Daniel was bound and hung naked from the yacht's crane, gagged, and with 50 pounds of steel weights chained to his ankles. I blew a thick cloud of pleasantly textured smoke into his face, causing him to cough and close his eyes. It's almost a pity. I nodded to Alexandra and stood back, watching as she smiled in anticipation of what was to come. I knew this was her favorite part. She removed the gag from him, and Daniel immediately began to desperately beg, making meaningless promises. I started the interrogation. Daniel, you know the meaning of the term bull, right? And to clarify, I don't mean a male cattle. I'm talking about a sexy bull. As he continued to beg confusedly, he seemed to slow down a little, confused by our calm, confident expressions. I chuckled. You know the rules, Daniel. Answers must be verbal. On the verge of panic, he nodded, then spoke. Yes, I know who Bull is. Well, Daniel, you ended up in this situation because you thought you could cuckold me by sleeping with my wife. Yes, I know that technically you would have to force me to raise your child for that, but it's just a game of words. Words evolve. However, I was quite generous in allowing you to play and find pleasure in many forms, but you wanted everything. So now I am forced to consider you an ox. The panic in his eyes lessened slightly as confusion took its place. I was silent for several minutes until he realized that I was waiting for him to stop talking. When he finally fell silent, I continued, statistically, in any given year, about 58% of the cattle population are born as young bulls. These bulls need to be easily identifiable to their owners, so they are marked so that no one can miss them. Daniel continued to plead, but his voice was barely audible and intermittent, as each breath caused him excruciating pain. Anyway, Daniel, as I was saying, the number of young bulls is too large. If they are allowed to mix, they will start fighting each other, harming the females in the process of killing each other. But the farmers have found a simple solution. Luckily for you, I don't think it's necessary to subject you to such humiliation, although you undoubtedly deserve it. I gave him a few more minutes of moaning and crying before I relented and continued my speech. Don't worry, Daniel, it won't last long. There's only one thing left, what always happens in the end: slaughter. I nodded, and one of the crew moved the crane over the water and released the hook, dropping our guest into a mile of deep ocean. Alexandra watched the place where his body disappeared under the water. After a few moments, she turned around with a grin and a sigh that I thought was a mini pleasure. Then she slowly opened her eyes, walked towards me, and brought my glass to her lips. After taking a sip, she asked, "Is there a party next weekend?" And hope you enjoyed your swim. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think, click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next one.